Next up, I'd like to introduce you to Laura Perryman.
Thanks. So hello, I'm Laura. I hope you're all enjoying the show so far. I'm really pleased to be here talking to you today. I'm going to talk about emerging design trends for Spring/Summer 17, so a little bit different from David's talk, looking much more at kind of products, textures, patterns and colours that are going to be relevant. So I'll be looking at key influences for these trends as well, so the kind of broader design drivers behind some of these trends for Spring/Summer 17. So those are going to be connected to design, sustainability and lifestyle. So one of the things about the future and kind of predicting the future and using trends is that the world around us is changing and evolving constantly. So new manners of like new technologies, smart services and objects we put in our homes are becoming more intuitive. And this illustration shows just how far we will go in the next 10 years. So here we've got 3D printing objects, a 3D printing machine printing our food and the objects in our home. And it's possible that we might even have some of our most mundane kind of products, such as fridges, being much more intuitive, telling us more about the contents that are inside. But how do we know this? Well, we use research in trends and identification of influential factors such as new technologies, the adoption of new technologies by consumers, and also consumer behaviour. And these are all really important factors when it comes to trends. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about me. I'm a colour and material and a trend expert. And I've got over 10 years experience working in the fields of colour and material design. So that's actually choosing colours and making sure that brands are really quite far in advance and are on trend into the next season. So I've helped brands such as Nokia, Toyota, Speedo and WGSN to choose future colour palettes and make sure they're on trend. I've acted as a consultant for people like Sainsbury's, Homebase, people like Caesarstone, to make sure that they have the right information that they need to inform their next product ranges. So that is colour and materials, textures, surfaces, finishes and new technologies. My company is called Colour of Sane, just so you know. And we're based in London and we specialise in future thinking and experiential design with colour and materials. So a little way that we do that is we look at two different factors. We look at foresight and we look at insight. So foresight, as we're in the trend spectrum talking about trends today, is the ability to anticipate what's next. So some of the things that we do are we create emerging trend forecast reports, innovation and design reports, but also future materials research. And the insight side is the dissemination of that. So it's the real kind of tangible outcome for trends. So I design signature colour palettes for clients, as well as materials and textures and recommending what's going to be next for them. Some examples of that are sort of colour and material trend reports such as this, and then also beautiful kind of textures and target materials. So I create target palettes, colour and texture for different companies. But today, I'm going to talk about trend forecasting, macro drivers, so they're the bigger overarching trend drivers for the season, and show you how those then influence trends. And then I'm going to talk about 4 trends for Spring/Summer 17, so these are going to be 4 stories, which will have colours, patterns and shape directions for them, so a design direction. So that's reorder, art culture, rustic roots and cultivate. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the trend forecasting process, because wherever I speak, or lots of questions I always get asked are like, how would you look into the future? How do trends come about? Where do they exist? Where do they come from? And there is a simple answer, really, in a nutshell. I'm going to show you how they develop. They develop on the marketplace in different ways. I use research, so I'm always looking at trade shows, art and design exhibitions and consumer behaviour, and kind of stitch together a point of view for trends. So trends are really about searching for things that stand apart. Most of the really truly innovative things that you see on the market that are trend driven are very small proportion of what's actually out there. So sometimes trends is about kind of sort of editing and finding the right things that are going to be relevant for consumers. So 2 kind of main factors for trends. You've got macro, which is kind of the larger overarching design trends. So that could be changes in politics, it could be lifestyle, it could be a new technology that might enter the market. And then micro, which is how it disseminates, so that's how it visualizes into trends. So macro can start in advance, so that's this foresight area, so 2 years in advance, looking at social, political, lifestyle changes and emerging shifts that might happen. And that could be different industries as well. So even though you're working in home and gift, there could be something that's happening in automotive design or lifestyle, and that will feed into the overarching design drivers. Now, a trickle-down effect happens, so the second part almost happens in a kind of chronological order. So you have designers and companies who are termed innovators, and they are working on early prototypes. They're on the edges of their fields, and they often pick up on emerging trends quicker than the mass market. That trickle-down effect happens again, and you get early adopters. So they might pick up on things, alterations in consumer taste. And then at 6 months to almost a year later, you have an established trend. And that's where products are launched that are obviously connected with the trend, that are in mainstream mass manufacture. There's 3 kind of main things to look at when you're kind of finding trends or finding interesting inspiration. And that's looking at commonalities across other industries. So often this trickle-down effect happens because different industries kind of play off of each other. And one way, a really simple way to illustrate this is through colour trends. So a retrospective of Mark Rothko's work happened in the US about 3 years ago. You often find that product development companies pick up on that inspiration. So here, ARPA, who are a office furniture company, picked up on the yellows and the oranges and adopted that into their product ranges for seating. And then 6 months later, Danish brand Vifa brought together their new kind of consumer electronics collection, their audio collection, using that bright, that sort of sunshiny yellow ochre colour. The second is observing lifestyle and consumer desires. This is a really important part of trend forecasting, so looking at what is happening with your consumer. So this could be lifestyle choices, it could be changes in politics, but this one I've chosen to focus on is about well-being. So there's a huge shift in the well-being market at the moment. Consumers are wanting to better themselves, and we're all wearing like Fitbits and like energy trackers and sleep deprivation trackers. We've all got these connected to ourselves now. The spending in the health and wellness industry has grown tremendously, and that's really been consumer-driven. So there's lots of apps and devices out there. But by 2020, this market is supposed to reach almost 70 billion in terms of its potential. So designing products and services around consumer well-being is a huge development area. Seeking out new technologies, and that's a very important part of trend forecasting. So when you're thinking about adopting something new for the next season or investing 2 or 3 years in advance, it's good to see what's happening out there in terms of new technologies. So I'm going to use the example of 3D printing here. So 3D printing has had a real revolution in the past 3 or 4 years. It's always been there as a kind of design technology, but it's had more credibility recently. So instead of it being crude, used as a novelty thing, it's been picked up for real purpose and intelligence. So this is actually a really interesting gift product. It's a sundial that has a 3D printed pattern inside. So when the light hits it, the time is projected onto the ground using those dots as a kind of matrix. So it changes. Also, you've got Adidas, who have mass manufactured 3D printed plastics, waste plastics. So there's a real kind of credibility happening with these technologies now. But future design trends, what's driving spring/summer 17 trends to emerge, and what kind of drivers are behind those bigger macro trends? Well, the truth is there's loads out there, but I've chosen to focus down on a few that will shape design and hopefully then trickle down into the gift and home industry. Some big areas I think are very, very key for design trends are arts and culture. So that might be big, influential design exhibitions that are happening, design teams kind of picking up on those, picking up on the colour and the use of materials. You've also got sustainability, so the way that people are living their lives and the products that they want to buy are very important, making sure that they're ethical, there's a real transparency about ethics. And then lifestyle as well, so how consumers feel in a point in time. So that could be a political situation or a lifestyle situation as well. And all of these things affect design. So in Spring Summer 17, there's a series of macro drivers. So these are the bigger overarching trends that are going to affect our micro design trends. So we can't really ignore it, this state of chaos that we're in terms of political unrest. We've seen this play out a lot across Europe recently. So terrorist attacks, the Brexit, immigration. This feels like a state of chaos, and that will affect the way that people and consumers will buy products and how they choose to live their lives. Design will respond, but I think it's interesting to see how this will play out. It will make us start to consider what is home, and I think there's some really, although immigration is a terrible topic and not really like a very kind of aesthetic one, and there's some real innovation happening within the immigration camps at Calais, such as people finding a home, finding a space, even though they're surrounded with chaos. So we have to think about how that can play out for us. The means of escape is very important. So this anti-effect away from this chaos, and we'll see a real change in experiences, so exploratory experiences, exploratory products, getting away and into the countryside and away from city life. There's a lot of more conscious consumers around now, so people and consumers wanting to know exactly what's in products, the ingredients, the ethics, how things are made. They're wanting to know more and more, and that's going to be something that's going to be very, very important as we design products for the future as well. And a real transparency about that as an expected to know where things are made. The provenance of products, so where things are made, and how a physical product is crafted, is seen as something to be desired by consumers. So having a brand that exposes this story regularly on a regular basis is really important. So this is Daniel Heath. He regularly hosts screen printing workshops from his workshop that show the process behind his handmade screen printed wallpapers and fabrics. So he invites people in to understand the very essence of his principal processes. As we move into the future, new sustainable sources will need to be found, and there's a few kind of provoking projects around at the moment that provoke where our future food sources will come from. So this is a product which shows the fact that we might be eating insects in the future as a new form of protein. That's quite far away, I feel, but I think there's a real kind of sense of science and nature coming together more, and a renewed interest in growing our own, even if that's scientifically enabled at home, and that's going to play out in one of our trends. Materials are becoming smarter, so that doesn't necessarily mean technology materials, it means materials that are reacting and that are time sensitive to the products that they are containing. So this piece of packaging is actually using a biodegradable plastic and actually biodegrades at the same rate as the product does inside. So when the product's finished and it's past its sell-by date, so is the plastic. And then this influence from arts and culture as well. So these different kind of macro drivers are all kind of intermixing together in order to give us a visual view of 2017. So the Tate's pop art exhibition, bold graphics, bold flat colour, and that kind of sensationalism with colour is very key for spring summer, and this will evolve as Georgia O'Keeffe's retrospective at the Tate, which is about to open, these surreal and abstract paintings that she does, very abstract marks and colour intensity. That's definitely going to continue. So I've got 4 trends for you, and I'm going to show and build up a visual picture of spring summer 17. So looking at products, textures, materials, and also print and graphics and colour. So there's 4 trends for spring summer 17, and they are reorder, which is about a minimalism, art culture, so this real bold graphic flat colour trend, rural roots, which is all about kind of stepping back, the need for escape, the need to kind of embrace craft and well-made objects again. And then cultivate, which is about science and nature joining together to create, I suppose, intelligent home products and intelligent home environments. So the first is reorder, and this is a really clean and minimalistic trend. So you've got a reaction to the state of chaos is almost like a backlash to that. So it's about creating products and spaces and interiors that are really calming and have a really sedative effect because they're quite minimalistic. They don't have chaotic surface finishes on them. They don't have chaotic shapes. They're about kind of finding a bit of peace and quiet again. And this is coming through being influenced by architecture. So you've got architecture with serene and almost like dystopic looking environments, but what it actually shows is that time and space and things like silence are almost new luxury commodities. So it's not about things, it's about experience and having a switch off. And that's part of this trend. The Borrellet Brothers textile screens, which you can see here, are a real kind of clean and structured and ordered way of splitting up spaces. So you've got space division without losing light and very ordered and structured kind of aesthetics happening. Within products and, I suppose, gift as well, you've got rhythmic compositions. So that's products in ordered compositions, creating a sense of, I suppose, order away from the chaos. So ceramics in tonal groups as a kind of therapy to this kind of like minimalist design, a kind of knowing where you are with it. And this is really important for retail environments as well, product display, so POS. And Edmund Dewall here, who's the image of these ceramics, really comes into his own trend here because he works a lot with sort of sets of ceramics in like very, very subtle and delicate colourways. But this trend isn't about no identity or kind of no minimalism, very clean and white. It's not all about that. You've got these subtle tactile details which kind of hint at humanism. So this idea of there is a human element to this. So here, this set of cups you can see, there's one or two that have just a trim or a texture change or a colour change on the edge. And that just indicates that kind of identity. There is an identity to this. And I think that could really play out when it comes to kind of spoons, bowls, placemats, that kind of thing. You've got colour for reorder, which is very subtle and delicate. There's a real kind of mix between cool and sort of warm neutrals. So they're like really, really monochromatic greys versus a sort of warm neutral in the middle there. There's a very kind of urban feel to this. So things like concrete architecture really kind of playing out in those mood images. But fundamentally, this is a monochrome palette, but it has these kind of touch points of other shades. So the sort of minty green and the coral are there only as very small accents. So they're not really dominant colours within this scheme. So each of the trends, I'm going to show you some shape and form directions, so how this is manifesting and how it could manifest into an actual product. Because I think that's really important when you talk about trends, that they don't just kind of stay up there in the ether and don't actually come down into a real kind of product level. But I work a lot with companies to kind of make sure that they understand these trends and they can use them. So Reorder's shape and form is really about using very basic shapes and sort of distorting them slightly. So you have shapes that are almost like archetypes, or almost like prototype stage, very simple, very clean, very basic, but they've had disruptive effects on the surface of them. So those are kind of sort of reflective of the kind of humanist element. So it's not just a non-identity kind of trend. You've got innovators already picking up on these trends, so that in that kind of macro spread kind of diagram I showed you to do with that innovators picking up. So Lee Broom's mirror there, the distorted off-center, and also Zaha Hadid's beautiful vessels, which are using like a metallized mirror surface, have got that kind of twisted and distorted ripple effect. So twist, breaks and ripples in product surfaces are very important. And you've almost got like reflective and shadow-like effects. There's a real kind of importance to do with kind of regularity and things in repeat, that bringing that sense of order is really important. So those bookends there, the kind of stacking repetitive shape, building up the overall shape is very important. So pattern and graphics very much is a kind of grid on grid direction. So large scale and macro details, so all over kind of tables and furniture, but then all the way down into like mini macro kind of grid compositions on small giftware products as well. So you've got iterative patterns on furniture and interior surfaces, brick and chevron, almost structured and ordered patterns, glassware there, having these beautiful linear graphics but on a transparent background, almost a bit offset. It's quite interesting. And then also Jamie Haynes' candle holder there. Again, that kind of archetype, very simplistic, basic form with those kind of very kind of repetitious lines being etched into the side of the glass there. So kind of that real kind of minimalist but gridded effect really playing out in terms of pattern and graphics. So the second trend is art culture. And this is very much playing on the pop art exhibition, as well as art and design have both held, a really strong relationship in the past, but this is really coming out to play. So you've got multiple industries kind of picking up on those bold graphic patterns. This is Valentino's Spring/Summer 17 Resort collection. They were really inspired by the graphic pop art canvases and have played that out on, kind of garment as well as product placement and visual merchandising as well. So you've got these like block-like overlaying, bold colour combinations really coming into play. Camilla Waller is an emerging artist from the London design scene. Again, kind of on the cusp of the Tate Modern's pop art exhibition, she's really come into her own, and she's really owning this kind of outlines, Memphis cartoon kind of outline graphic. So you've got bold compositions of pattern and flat colour, which is incredibly important to this trend, and how they work together. So it's not all about one colour. They definitely have to be used in combination with each other. Christo's recent staged art installation shows that there's a real kind of experience happening within the art world as well, and it's definitely kind of back. So this was a huge installation that Christo installed into a lake in Italy, which was a bold colour walkway which was suspended in water, and you could actually walk along it and have this almost like completely sensorial experience, an experience that you would never normally have. And art's really kind of doing that now, so that it's kind of connected with the idea of needing to escape, but these surreal, bold and creative experiences are really important. And then you've got kind of artistic endeavours, so playful, almost like tongue-in-cheek sensory compositions. You've got textiles here that have like sort of added elements of surprise and knitted touch points and like mixed materials, so kind of colour and mixed materials coming together, so plastics and textiles and kind of tactility all having a massive kind of sensory resurgence. And so the art culture palette is very bold. It's about still life compositions, and especially that pop art Roy Lichtenstein still life with goldfish image in the middle is a real kind of high point from the Tate's pop art exhibition, where you've got this flat colour with the bold graphic black outlines. You've got the sort of bold flat colours, yellows, blues, pinks and reds all coming together and being in one palette, so it's not about using them all kind of separately. And you can see that kind of VM visual merchandising being inspired by this whole trend, using like block colour and a kind of very, I suppose, still life way of showcasing products, and that's really important. So shape and form, you've got these framed outlines, so these black framed outlines, and blacks wasn't actually in my palette because I feel like blacks are kind of given. But you have here those candelabra sticks are actually using black outline and don't actually have a volume to them, which really kind of shows that that's really taking hold and influencing shape and form. The lovely mirror there you've got in the middle, you've got these beautiful kind of bold outlines and little accents on the side, really taking colour into archways, which I think is really important. And then from Spring/Summer 17, the catwalks, there was a huge trend within makeup, within the cosmetic industry, where you see these really bold outlines on lips and eyes and eyebrows, almost like really exaggerated pop art inspired. And then prize pins. I don't know if anyone's seen prize pins. They're a really interesting kind of gift company that have just launched earlier this year or back end of last year. And they're really taking on those kind of playful, graphic, bold outline illustrations and bringing them back again, which is really interesting. And then pattern graphics, very kind of splattered, kind of sketch. And we've seen this slowly start to grow, but I think it's really, really going to come into its own in spring/summer 17. So you've got the very painterly marks, the very kind of expressive sketch lines, and even that rug in the first image, it's almost like a sketched outline. And that's quite interesting in terms of pattern, very loose, kind of artistic approach. And you've got this kind of random, spontaneous marks in ceramics, and also terrazzo, which is like a surface texture, is certainly starting to come into its own and be very important within interiors. So again, could some of those techniques be taken into kind of placemats or objects or kind of ceramic ranges, for instance? They certainly could be inspired by this graphic print kind of trend. So our third trend is rural roots, and that really reflects back some of those macro trends I was talking about earlier to do with the need to escape and that kind of downtime for well-being, consumers being a lot more in tune with their well-being and wanting to escape. It's a very plain and simple, but inspired by the countryside, and where rural methods, time and space are celebrated once more. And we're going to see a lot more of this coming through. You've got a lot of retreats, and escape to the outdoors is to showcase the fact that people and consumers are wanting to spend more time outside, spend more time away from urban environment, and actually take a break. And there's actually quite a few kind of companies picking up on this. There's a company that's called Weekend 365, and they have just done a whole kind of licensing piece on ordnance survey maps, which is quite interesting, kind of highlighting certain areas in the world, kind of like beach resorts or kind of the great outdoors, and highlighting kind of mountain ranges and things like that. And I think that's quite interesting, picking up on this rural roots trend. You've got kind of handcrafted, slow making, time and skill are being rediscovered again, and kind of a world that's saturated by digital interactions, physical objects, kind of physical made things are having kind of like new status, and they're given new status again. And I think we're seeing a lot more kind of artisan traditions coming back. So things like patchwork, pottery, basket weaving, braiding, woodwork, and even very simplistic things such as like reading and letter writing. There's actually a real resurgence in sitting down and writing a letter, which is not something that many of us do when we write millions of emails day to day. So there's a real kind of resurgence back to that old kind of way of thinking, I think, and those traditional crafts. You've got interiors taking on kind of this idea of soft solace, so handmade and soft and simple textiles and materials are really important. Things like natural dyeing, which a few years ago would have been something that would be right on the peripheral, like someone who's a maker of textiles would have used, but is now starting to trickle down into mainstay mass manufactured textiles. Because consumers are more conscious and they want to know that things are made well and they're made ethically and they're made with a conscience. So you have home interior styling being quite sparse and quite modest there as well. In terms of colour, Rural Roots definitely speaks of some of those kind of imagery, some of the imagery that you can see there. So freshly baked bread, kind of rural life, slow pace and low tech are really important kind of keywords for this trend. You've got this very soft and neutral palette, almost like a sun-blushed mustard, and although the screen's not really showing it very well, there's a lovely kind of rich terracotta colour there, and that was very, very heavy at Milan Furniture Fair this past May, which is a design event where lots of people go to kind of research future collections and future trends. So you have got these Puritan colours as well. So you've got this Puritan white and a cream, which isn't showing very well up there on the screen, as well as a kind of duck egg blue, which is incredibly important to kind of balance off that palette. In terms of shape and form, you have these really rustic vessels. So again, those handcrafted techniques, so kind of hand carving, whittling, and craft forms are having a real resurgence. You've got a company that's called Forest and Found. They make hand-made objects such as the spoons at the top there, using these rural twigs and sticks and branches to create handles in a very kind of authentic way. And you've got, in placemats and ceramics, you've got, some techniques such as iron oxide glazes onto stoneware, which are really, really textural, really, really haphazard, and kind of change and have that kind of handmade quality to them. So the making and the marks and the skill and the craft should be celebrated. That's why the jug image in the middle is so iconic and important for this trend, because you can see the seams and you can see how someone's made it and joined it together. And that's really should be celebrated now. So those kind of imperfections should be seen as very beautiful crafted details. In terms of pattern and graphics, you've got these delicate impressions. So the sort of nature and countryside idyllic marks and motifs are coming forward here. This is another image from Daniel Heath. His wall panels are using etching to put his sort of hand-drawn illustrations, which are based on kind of birds and flora and fauna and sort of rural countryside plants. And then you have kind of this idea of open work and felt and embroidery and quilting becoming very important in terms of pattern. So the ceramic image in the middle almost looks like it's had a piece of embroidery, like it's squashed into the surface of it. So idyllic illustrations are quite important. You've got tactility on product, quilting, and textures. And there's also a designer that is actually here today when I was researching this particular trend, really caught my eye in terms of her home and gift. And that's Hannah Logmuir, who is actually from rural Scotland, and lots of her kind of illustrations are based on idyllic countryside scenes. So she's kind of illustrating, the beautiful flock of geese kind of moving off the kind of waterways, and it kind of really has that essence of handmade about it, and I think it's really beautiful. And I think the tactility on products is really key. So those ceramic vessels that you can see in the middle, they've got the marks on, they've got like a hand-rendered feel to them, beautiful kind of glazes, and that's very tactile, very authentic kind of trend that's really important. So our fourth trend is cultivate, and this is our last trend for the season, and it's really driven, again, from some of those macro thoughts to do with health and well-being, growing your own kind of stuff at home. Has always been there, kind of people having allotments and that sort of thing, but as more and more we move into urban environments, we don't have necessarily gardens and spaces, we're city dwellers. We have to think about how we can be more self-sufficient. So some of these products are actually using modern methods in order to be able to grow things at home, and have plants and kind of natural greenery within an interior space, even though we might not be outside. And it also is really speaking of the fact that eco products and eco kind of materials are not bland and brown and kind of, sort of dusty and old looking. They're actually clean and modern and simple and can be integrated into our homes very easily. And also this trend is also about putting plants on a pedestal, almost highlighting them within our spaces. So you've got some interesting kind of thoughts behind this trend and drivers. So modern hydroponics, we're seeing actually like hydroponic systems becoming very, very commonplace, and the use of UV on the mass market. So you've got these clever, smarter products. So this is actually a company called Bulbo, and they create plant pots which have this UV light integrated, ceramic UV light integrated, which is ideal for kind of like city dwellers or people that don't have don't have a kind of agricultural environment or garden, that they can still cultivate things indoors. And they're actually a really modern company, really interesting. You've got curated greenery. So this is really inspired by the art world a little bit, and also architecture. This is a Norwegian artist who I'm not going to pronounce because I can't pronounce it. But he used a gallery in Oslo and created this kind of fantastical kind of greenery space by actually filling the whole space with grass and flowers and soil, and kind of creating this kind of curated greenery experience. And I think this is really important because we see green and we see nature as a sanctuary, and it's important to have this within our space. So I think these things are going to be growing in the future. Nature is kind of staged almost like art pieces, and this is important for kind of like the gift and the home industry as well. So you have almost like gallery-like specimens of plants in frames as prints, or even as like natural presses of the original plant itself, coming into interior spaces. The rise of biophilic design is incredibly important within this trend as well. So there's lots of elements kind of joining in to create cultivate as a trend. So biophilic design is the use of as much as possible sustainable and natural elements within spaces in order to create a feeling of well-being and nourishment. So this is actually a little architectural model of the new Google offices in London, made by the Borolek brothers, and they were kind of like hinting at how kind of natural elements, greenery, planting could be integrated into this space in order to make it feel more, lighter, more kind of, enabling the kind of I suppose the employees to feel more at ease, more at home, increasing their kind of productivity and their well-being. So biophilic design is very important for the future of design. So Cultivate's palette is green. It's not to be surprised, but I think this kind of different types of greens coming together, the saturation level of some of those greens are incredibly important. So you've got really lush, like the planting textures and the kind of greenery cultivated together. They're really inspiring some of those colours, although this green is maybe not showing them so well. But this beautiful kind of bright lime green on the end with a kind of beautiful verdigris green, which is a darker green, and then complemented by a sage. So they're not all bright greens, but they're kind of soothing, and they have that kind of soothing sort of mentality behind them. And then an exhibition recently of Indian artist Bhupen Kaha, I think you say it. He makes these beautiful paintings which are using layers of beautiful green colours, painting these kind of tropical scenes in rural India. And he's been very influential, I think, for a visual cue for this Cultivate palette. So he has the greens richly combined together in his palettes on his paintings. But then there's these beautiful little highlights, which is where the kind of pink and the sort of other tones come from in order to complement this palette. So Cultivate's shapes and forms are quite interesting. They're quite diverse. There's some quite diverse references on this mood board because I wanted to show you different ways that this trend is manifesting. I think eco and smart, as I've said before, are starting to kind of join and come together and create, playful shapes and forms. So this image at the bottom here is a product that's called Solar Flower, and it's actually a solar device, but it's not kind of panels in the traditional format. It's actually emulating a beautiful flower, so kind of mimicking a nature form here, and being really useful and being an eco product. So it's kind of doing all the things that it needs to do in order to be really sustainable. And actually it can be plugged in, it can be used, it can be moved around outside and repositioned with the sun at different points, different rays and things like that. So it's quite interesting. The kind of biodegradable plastics, again, plant-based plastics being more commonplace. We're trying to replace the idea of oil-based plastics eventually. Again, kind of ending their time in this universe, and we'll have to think about sustainable alternatives to plastic. So again, that's Tomorrow's Machine. They're a company who makes kind of conceptual packaging. They are suggesting that this is a packaging that contains a kind of cress, like a salad, but actually it disintegrates when the cress in the salad is past its life and its sell-by date. What's really interesting about this particular shape and form trend is the organic growth. And so you can see a couple of products on the other side of the mood board which have almost like stem-like I suppose, their stem-like shapes. And that's like home accessories becoming hosts for plant life, but also having like dual functionality. So it's not just creating pots on their own anymore. It's about integrating them with other features. So that end image is actually a light and a plant pot together and a little table. So kind of a modular kind of system that could be installed in an interior and still has that kind of planted element to it. Multifunctional products as well, so the table with a plant in the middle, but then the table on the outside still being a usable area, kind of combining planting into products in different ways. I think those are really exciting kind of references and ways forward that could move on kind of a traditional plant pot, if you would. And then you've got, in terms of like glazes and on ceramics, you've got these beautiful kind of like luscious, green, thick, glossy glazes coming on, almost looking very tropical in themselves. And then like organic grown looking kind of ceramics, which are quite out there, but kind of look at the kind of cell shapes and kind of the growth idea. And cultivates pattern and graphics, looking at these kind of encapsulated nature references, so leaves, plants, flora and fauna, almost been suspended or pressed in liquid motion. So you've got sort of almost shadowy impression effects onto surface, and that's a really lovely image, the one in the middle at the top, which actually shows like daisies actually impressed into concrete, then they've been selectively glazed and selectively coloured. It's something really interesting about that. It's not actually nature, but it's like an impression of that. And then you've got different sort of shapes and sizes overlaying on top of each other. So in terms of wall or sticker graphics, you've got sort of the leaf shapes there being quite transparent and large scale, so kind of nature on a large scale, that kind of art aspects to cultivate and kind of celebrating nature in a large scale is really important. And then their last image there, just the gallery kind of effect, the idea of putting nature and plants on a pedestal, arranging them to create a beautiful kind of repeat design in their kind of rawest state, almost to create the kind of wallpaper design there. So normally what I do at the end of each presentation, when I've looked at 4 different trends and I've looked at 4 different colour palettes, is actually to analyse them and look at them. So this is almost like an overview of the colours for Spring Summer 17, broken down into the 4 stories so you can see them all together. So it certainly starts to kind of like highlight certain groupings and certain tones that have been important or are going to be important, and there's commonalities. Obviously you can see some here for yourselves. But what's really important is when you're thinking about using colour for a new product range is not to just take all the colours. There's certain tones and certain shades that are more relevant for certain industries. So it's kind of like looking at those in a different way. So the first is greens. There's a strong sense of green within the palettes, and then also terracottas and pinks and reds. So that's it.